Hello everyone, I'm Ben Johnson and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with the chess world's best players, promoters, and educators about their lives, careers, current projects, and best practices. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. Hello everyone, welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We are here live in Nashville, Tennessee, and it is my great honor to have my first guests of the day. They are the Executive Director of the USCF, Carol Meyer, and the President of the US Chess Board, amongst other titles, Mike Hoffpauir. Thanks for joining us, Carol and Mike.
Good to be here.
So you guys, I'm sure, are having a hectic weekend. There's about, 2,300 kids here, Carol?
Just about.
So 2,300 students enthusiastically playing chess and swinging from the chandeliers in between the rounds. So we're all having a good time here. And how's everything running so far?
You know, I think you always have the early event kinks to iron out, but we've got those ironed out and things are running really smoothly.
Yeah, that's right. It's what, the first round is always a round of adjustment, especially with a lot of new players in the tournament. And, we hold these tournaments all across the country. And we do that specifically so that we can attract new members to the Federation, have new people get a chance to see what a national tournament is like. So there's quite a few players that are here that this is their some of them it's their first tournament,
right? Let
alone first national championship. So there's a big adjustment not only for the kids but also for the parents, and there's a big wow factor. And I mean, it's pretty impressive when you walk into that room and you see 1,900 chessboards laid out. And the room is the size of 2 football fields, and that's biggest anything. Because most kids have only seen something the size of this small room here. About and they're just not used to seeing something that's that large and that humongous from their perspective. It's just mind-boggling for them.
Yeah, it's a long way from the elementary school gyms and the church halls that most chess tournaments take place in.
Absolutely.
And I'm always amazed seeing the look of abject fear in parents as they sit there waiting for their kids' games to end, sitting in the hall, and you can just see the tension in their face, just wanting their kid to walk out with a smile. And especially now, since I have kids myself, I get that perspective and get how much scarier it is to be a parent than to just be playing and just go think about the chess game. So I want to get into your guys' background a little bit. Carol, you recently became the executive director of the USCF late last year. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your background prior to that?
Sure. I've been a nonprofit manager almost my entire career, and so I specialize in running organizations that are nonprofits. I do not come from a chess background. In fact, I've never played a competitive game, only very casual games and long ago. But prior to coming to US Chess, I ran a healthcare association, regional healthcare association for the hospice industry. And prior to that, I ran a NASA and NOAA funded Earth Science Data and Technology project for over a decade. And, we were, the issues are different, but the themes span across organizations and industries. Nonprofit organizations face similar challenges regardless of the industry you're in.
So what was your first thought when you saw the opening for the U.S. Chess Federation Executive Director?
It came to me by way
Little
of...
did she know.
Exactly.
I think that's my reaction now, Mike. A friend forwarded me the opportunity, and I was intrigued because it was different than anything I had ever considered doing. My kids are grown, and so I've been involved with youth activities as a parent, as a coach, as a volunteer leader, but never having run a youth-facing organization, albeit that's not all we are. That seems to be much of what we are today. And it was appealing for that reason because it was different and it sounded more fun than working for industry, if you will. And so I decided to apply.
Okay, and we'll pick that up, and I'd like to hear how the job has met or been different from your expectations. But Mike, you're the president of the U.S. Chess Board, so you were instrumental in hiring Carol, correct? Or at least had a hand in it?
Yes.
So
the executive board had put out, an advertisement about 6 months in advance. in order to, solicit, qualified candidates. And we received, well over 125 different packets. And, honestly, 90% you could just instantly set off to the side because, I play chess. I could be the president or the executive director. But there were, some 25 to 30 candidates that we felt were, they deserve an oral interview, by phone. And so we reached out and did those and then called the field down to, I guess it was 5 or 6, and then had in-person interviews last year at the U.S. Open when we were near my hometown in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay, and what was it about Carol that you found appealing as a candidate?
Well, all of the candidates had strengths, but in particular, what we were looking for was to kind of break the mold in terms of what had been our CEO position in the past. And we were really, really strong on looking for people that were very, very deep into nonprofit organization experience. And quite frankly, the previous executive director, Jean Hoffman, knew that she had evolved the organization to a point, and then with it transitioning from a 501c4 organization into a 501c3 nonprofit, that it deserved someone who had a background in that to be the lead of the organization.
So what's the difference between the two?
Literally the one, you get all the tax contributions that, people can make, and I can take the tax breaks because I make those contributions.
Okay. So which one?
Yeah, fundamentally, a C4 is a membership organization. It's an IRS designation, but it's not a charitable organization. A 501c3 is a charitable organization. And as Mike said, tax deductions for donations can be taken by the individual making that contribution. But more importantly, I think when US Chess made that transition, its mission changed, and its mission now has an educational purpose.
So if you listen and you haven't given, you're wrong. Okay, all right.
Okay. And so, Carol, how is the transition shaping up so far?
In terms of organization or in terms of my transition?
Well, both.
Okay. So, I spend every day learning. I learn more than one thing every day. And so that, I imagine that will be an ongoing process for me during my tenure with US Chess. And, we make mistakes and we own them and we fix them and we move on. And, my goal is to help move this organization forward so that it's sustainable in a good way that meets the many priorities that the board has set. Changing an organization is a slow process. It's not just about saying, ruling by fiat that we are going to be X when we've been Y for all of time. So we're talking about things like culture change and programmatic additions and retraining staff and adding different kinds of staff. And so this is a process. I wish I had a magic wand. I don't. I also wish I had a crystal ball. I don't. And what my approach has been is to listen to as many people as possible and try to work with the board to synthesize a path that we can move this organization forward.
Okay. And so you mentioned that you've had a lot of learning to do as you go. So how does that learning take shape? Do you find yourself reading books or just reaching out to people like Mike on the board, or how do you learn the lay of the land?
Yeah, so my focus is really not about learning chess. It's about learning chess culture and learning about relationships that exist within our community, learning who has what contributions to make. It's really, I think this is really a relationship business, and that's both with our individual members and our affiliates, as well as partners that we have, some of whom are here, at the Elementary Nationals, here as exhibitors. We have a number of those. It really is about building those relationships.
Okay, and so Mike, you've got a long background in scholastic chess, and you're also active in the for-profit world. I hear that you're an astronaut for one thing, and I've worked in the military and do some consulting for the military. So how did you get into the chess world, Mike?
Well, I'm a 27-year veteran of the U.S. Army, retired as a colonel in 2005, and was, the only job I ever knew was being in the Army. And the Army teaches a lot of organizational skills to officers, especially as you become more senior. They send you to quite a bit of, senior management schooling. I was fortunate enough to have a fellowship at Harvard to learn quite a bit about management. But more importantly, for me, I learned chess just out of curiosity as a kid. I mean, a couple of friends and we saw the Bobby Fischer match on TV when we were in elementary school, and hey, that looks neat. So that's what kind of turned us on. And so one of us convinced our mom to buy a book at the bookstore, and we kind of taught ourselves, here's the pawn, and now the pawn has moved. And so we kind of learned chess that way, and then we just kept playing. But when I became married and had children, I was teaching my kids. And so I was a chess parent for a good 5 years. And then I guess because of my tendency to like things to be very organized and very very regimented, and because of my military background, I was pointing out things to tournament directors at tournaments my kids were going to, and they said, you got some good ideas. Maybe you should think about being a tournament director. And I'm not one to say no to a challenge. So that's what got me started.
Can you think of any examples of things that you saw that weren't being done?
Oh, I mean, just things like, I was watching through the glass door in this like you said, the tournament was being played in a cafeteria at an elementary school.
Yeah.
And I'm watching through the glass wall because I can't go in the room. I'm a parent. And I see this one kid gets up and goes to the bathroom, and another kid reaches behind and changes the clock.
Right.
So I'm like, what is going on here? And so I tell the tournament director, hey, I saw that kid go to the bathroom and his opponent reached and changed the clock, And
this was not your kid's game,
no,
right?
not my kid's game. I just was, and it was close to the window. I'm like, how could the kid, But, so, I just pointed that out, but that's what got me started. And then I was able to, latch on to some very influential and very skilled tournament directors like Mike Atkins and Ernest Schlick and Frank Guadalupe and people with, very deep chess backgrounds, because I soon got involved in the scholastic committee on the council. And, Jay Stallings who's sitting here in the room with us today. Jay was kind of one of my mentors in bringing me up through the scholastic community and how to do the, ruling, how to make the regulations be what they are and so forth. And then I became, one of the co-chairs of the Scholastic Council, and then ran for the executive board, and here I am.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I know that everyone is glad to have you on board. So
sometimes I wonder.
Well, if you're not making any enemies, you're definitely not doing anything right. So you've got to find the right balance. So, Carol, what has surprised you the most from a personal standpoint in terms of getting acclimated as a executive director?
Yeah, I think what I wasn't
Careful.
fully prepared for is the some of the how strong the culture is, and the sometimes the adults not always behaving the way we would expect adults to behave.
Yes.
There seems to be a lot of that, and I think it's linked to the passion that people have for the game and for their kids, and wanting to see them come along in the game. So I knew that there was an archetype of a chess personality. Yeah, everybody has that sort of framework, but I think I found that to be true in some cases, but it's good, and I think the passion is what drives the organization and what has made us successful over the long haul. Mm-hmm. People really are passionate about the game,
and even here at the at this event, we have Grandmaster Irina Krush and Grandmaster Robert Hess. And both of whom not only just great chess players, but just excellent role models for the younger generation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was privileged to have Robert Hess on Perpetual Chess, and he was a really, really good guest, and his passion came through, and he's one of my favorite chess announcers as well. And Irina is someone I've been wanting to interview for a long time, so I've known her a little bit in more casual circles, but you can't really grill people about their careers when you're like hanging out with friends and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to getting her in the hot seat later today. But so getting back to the mission of the organization and how your work is shaping up, we have a question from Jennifer Valens, a supporter of the podcast. She says, first, thank you for taking on the post of executive director. This is for you, Carol, and congratulations. I understand you have a background and have been successful in fundraising for nonprofits. Can you tell us what plans are in place for seeking grant funding for U.S. Chess?
So U.S. Chess is in a position to hire a development director, our fundraising staff position, later this year.
Is that a new position?
That would be a new position. And actually, I have the job description here with me this week. So we're not just talking about grants. I mean, we are talking about a comprehensive development program, which would include, individual giving across many levels of gifts. We would be looking at raising money from foundations, private foundations. We'd be looking at sponsorships. We'd be looking at in-kind contributions. We'd be looking at legacy gifts, that people make to organizations when they pass on. So the framework for that has not been set up. The development director, in concert with myself and with the board and with the U.S. Chess Development Committee, will be working to set that framework. There's some other things, though, that we're working on to increase the chance that that person will have success when they do come on board. And a lot of what I've been spending my time on since I joined U.S. Chess is, frankly, working on infrastructure and working toward rebuilding some of the infrastructure that we have that's aging, that's cranky, and needs to be either evolved or replaced. And that is a long-term project, probably another 2 years before we can breathe easier. But those building blocks, like being able to manage prospects and being able to track them properly and communicate properly, we don't have a good capability in-house at this time to do that kind of work. So again, we've got things that are proceeding on parallel tracks, but there's a lot of interdependencies that aren't all that visible to our members or the outside world, because we're really down in the weeds trying to build that backbone of the organization that has to be built.
And I would add that each year, it's sort of traditional in this executive board that we use our early winter or January-ish executive board meeting as a strategic planning session. And that's what we did when we did it in January. And one of the objectives and goals that we talked about considerably was how do we improve and set the foundation in place to conduct charitable organization kinds of work, whether that be, bringing in money to support underprivileged youths, funding research, perhaps in areas like Alzheimer's and how learning chess may help stem the tide of some of those horrific diseases that too many of us are aware of. But lots of ideas, and we tried to stay out of the weeds, as Carol said, from a standpoint of thinking up very specific initiatives as opposed to let's lay the soil out, fertilize the soil so that we can throw the seeds in it and the seeds have a chance to really grow and make, and bear good fruit for the organization. But we did a lot of that in January, and we're going to have a sort of a follow-up session at our next executive board meeting here actually next weekend in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay. So not at the point of approaching any companies or anything like that at this point?
So in a comprehensive fashion, the answer to that is no. But we're approaching companies and donors all the time for specific needs or initiatives that kind of come up in the moment. And so, we're building relationships. One example, the Alzheimer's Association is coming to the U.S. Open this summer. There's a lot of interest in cognitive games and what that can do to either delay the onset of things like Alzheimer's disease, chess being one of those games. That is a natural partnership for us. And they're coming to do a seminar at our U.S. Open on brain health and aging. And so we're not asking them for money, but we're building relationships so that we can find those common ground activities or perhaps even research study that might catapult us to something really, really great in the future. And it's all right now about laying those building blocks or the foundation for a future.
And it's when you're seeking charitable contributions from an organization, it's not just going knock on someone's door, hey, can you give me a buck? Mm-hmm. It's you have to put some forethought into it, and you have to consider things like, what is the mission of that particular organization? How does our mission interface with and overlap with that organization's mission? What's the likelihood that organization may support us? What are the themes and messages we want to carry into that boardroom to talk to that, chief executive officer, chief financial officer, or leader in that organization that would, strike a tone with them that really rings true, and that they feel that their dollars are going to something that's valued, because the money they give, they want to see that there's really some payoff at the other end from a standpoint of improving the community, improving a certain group of people, or just forwarding their own organization's objectives, regardless of the objectives of chess, because they're putting up the money. And we do have corporate donors already. Companies like Two Sigma, Booz Allen Hamilton, and others have been routinely given money every year to support the college Final Four of chess, the uniforms and jackets that our world youth players wear to international competitions. So we've had quite a bit, and we also have some very, very strong private donors as well. And you want to create opportunities across the board for members to give, perhaps in a membership giving campaign during the holiday season, like lots of organizations do, and better give throughout the year, and then to have corporate organizations that want to come and seek you out because they understand that your mission is similar to theirs, and doing that is quite a challenge.
Yeah, I would imagine so. So by the way, you guys mentioned earlier that you were transitioning from primarily being membership finance based first donation based. So what governed the decision to make that transition?
I would say that the organization, I think it was just evolutionary in nature, because at that time the U.S. Chess Trust was the charitable arm of the U.S. Chess Federation, and specifically some of the executive board members at that time, Alan Priest was a big one, had a big influence in that. But Alan is he's a certified public accountant. So Alan could foresee the benefits for the organization of going that route in transitioning the organization itself from 501c4 to 501c3 status. But it was just the idea of opening up additional avenues wherein the people who contributed could then benefit by the tax break from that, from them providing their contributions.
And I think we see it bearing out in what the executive board has set as priorities for the organization. And, U.S. chess throughout its history has really been focused on rated tournament play. That has been the thing that's been consistent in our wheelhouse throughout all of time. But I think in some ways that limits the potential of our organization to be exclusively focused on that. We will remain committed to rated tournament play for, I think, forever. But we also recognize that there's a chess playing public that we don't speak to, and that we'd like to capture them as part of our chess playing community, What that means, I don't know, but we need to find ways to grow the chess playing population, whether they play in a tournament or not. We need to help educate on the understood benefits of chess, whether it's in the youth ranks or among older adults. Personally, having come from a healthcare, end-of-life healthcare organization just prior to this, one of the things I learned very soon after arriving in my role there was that older adults, one of the things that doesn't get talked about is that they suffer from isolation. Well, chess can be a social tool to link older adults, whether it's through senior centers or in residential communities that serve older adults. That it becomes a way to combat isolation. Not to mention that it may have some benefit for brain health, and so I don't hear a lot of people talking about those things because it doesn't involve ratings, and I think we should be talking and will be talking about those as opportunities for U.S. chess.
Yeah. Speaking of chess having a much broader reach than just competitive chess, I am John Bartholomew, who's become quite popular on YouTube with instructional videos, and when he travels, he does meetups sometimes where he'll just reach out and say, anyone who's been watching my videos, come on out. And he alluded on Twitter, I think it was, to doing a meeting where 100 people who had seen his videos, and I can't even remember where it was, but it wasn't like a huge population center in this case, came to his gathering, and out of the 100, I think it was one who had played a tournament before. So there's just so much opportunity, and with the push that chess.com and other organizations are making into esports, I think it's great to not feel like chess has to be this strictly competitive endeavor, because even people like me who grew up going to nationals and competing in nationals and now does some coaching in nationals and stuff like that, but as you get older, your priorities change and you aren't necessarily looking to lock horns with whatever limited free time you have with someone. So in that respect, you still want to be involved in chess and supporting chess and, have as big a tent as possible. So I do think it's a good idea. But I want to also pivot to world chess. So obviously here in the United States, we're super excited that Fabiano Caruana, who's just an amazing representative for chess, will be competing with Magnus later this year. So I was curious how that hits the USCF. Like when it's an American player who suddenly emerges from the candidates to play, do you guys have responsibilities in conjunction with that, or are you just fans like the rest of us?
Well, I would say most importantly, we don't want to impose at all on what that player would like to do. If the player, asks for assistance, we can work with others to bring kinds of assistance to help the player. But I mean, we want that player to craft their preparation and attendance at the World Championship in the way that they feel comfortable doing it, and not try to impose or force something upon them or say, hey, take this, that's all we can do, and leave it. We're not going to do that. We have had communications with other organizations as well as with Fabio's own management about, ways that we may be able to assist, and those discussions are still ongoing. But it's foremost in our thought that we want him to be able to do well. We want him to be able to prepare the way he wants to prepare, and we definitely do not want to impose in any way, shape, or form on his preparation, so that he's free to think and free to do what he really needs to do to get ready for that event.
Makes sense. Yeah. It's exciting. So we'll we're all.
I mean, I can remember being 7, 8 years old, watching on TV in black and white TV the commentary of the Fischer game and just being fascinated by what I was seeing as a kid. And now it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen for a whole new generation of kids. And it's going to be a media experience like is rarely seen in chess. And I mean, it's got huge potential to start another bow wave. And so we've been at all three of our national championships for the scholastic so far this year. I mean, we've gone out of our way to really put together a a program and a message that we hope Fabio gets, and we know he is because we've seen that on Facebook, I think, Carol. But I mean, we've had at the junior highs, at the high schools, and at this tournament here, we've had all the kids come to the center of the room, and 1, 2, 3, everybody yell Fabio, and we take a picture, and everybody's waving. But I mean, this chess playing community is definitely behind where he's going.
And I think the kids are excited because they know that he too played in these events when he was younger, and that is a role model close to home that they didn't always have. So I think there's a lot of excitement.
And I probably personally saw him playing in tournaments when he was single digit in age, and I was a tournament director. And I remember having to go get the phone books for him to sit on.
Right.
Because he was so small.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
I needed 2 yellow Norfolk phone books. They're about 3 inches thick a piece, and for him to sit on to be high enough to see in the table properly.
Yeah, it's he's come a long way. On in the Facebook chess teacher thread, people started just sharing stories of because Fabiano was a fixture in the New York chess scene, and I lived in New York in late 90s and early 2000s when he was growing up. So everyone's showing their games. Everyone's hoping they played him when he was 7 and maybe 1 before, because that's basically the only chance you're going to get. And just telling stories about like when they knew he was special and stuff like that. So yeah, it's really exciting, and definitely looking forward to it. So we do have one topic that is not as uplifting. So for listeners who may not have heard this backstory, we're here at the elementary nationals, K through 6th grade. At the junior high nationals, there was an allegation of cheating by one of the teams. Basically, it was suggested that they manipulated the ratings so that they were able. That this team's coach manipulated the ratings so that they were able to play in a section in which the kids didn't belong, and then they had a standout result in the section and ended up winning the nationals. So there's been a lot of discussion online about this controversy, about what can be done, and some grumbling about the way it's been handled so far. So we have a question that's just a prelude. For listeners who aren't familiar with the backstory, if you Google it, you can find more information. But those are the broad brushstrokes. Basically, there was a tournament leading up to the nationals that may or may not have occurred. The results were basically led to a lot of rating points being lost and these kids being able to play in a section that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to. So we don't know for sure if this tournament leading up to the nationals was legitimate. So anyway, big prologue to the question from Chris Wainscott, which is, what rule changes would you like to see in order to both avoid a situation like the recent junior high nationals, or if it can't be avoided, at least be able to deal with it immediately when it surfaces?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate that question. In particular, I'll be very honest, we're not going to comment on that specific case because we are anticipating that there will be an ethics complaint that's going to get filed, and the executive board is in position at a part in the appeals process where the matter could come to the executive board. So we're not going to discuss it publicly in any way, shape, or form. But what I will tell you is that this is a learning organization. And as an example, when we saw the potential consequences, we sat back and developed a very prototype, it's a very infant, I guess what I would call it, algorithm that is looking at the peak rating supplement ratings for players. And we've applied it at the high school, and we've applied it here at this tournament. And what the algorithm does is it's in particular, it's going back to the June 2017 rating supplements, which was when supernational results from last year would have hit players' rating supplements. Looking at all the rating supplements through the current rating supplement for this tournament in particular, the May tournament, the May supplement and the April supplement for the high school nationals that were completed a couple weeks ago. And the first thing the algorithm does is it looks for that player's peak rating in the rating supplement, not a peak post-tournament rating, did that player's rating in a rating supplement at any time exceed the threshold for that undersection? Okay? So, and it could have been by 1 point. So, okay, we saw that we could make that work. So, okay, well, let's make it 30 points over the limit. Let's see what happens. And yep, we can do that too. Well, let's take a look and see if the algorithm can detect a player whose rating was above the threshold in April and then drop below it in May so they could qualify for the tournament. Yeah, we could do that too. And they said, well, let's go back another month. Let's go March to May. Yes, we can do that too. And for this tournament here, there were 119 players whose rating exceeded at some time during that almost a year's worth of rating supplements, where the rating had gone over the threshold by at least 1 point. Okay, there were 79 who had exceeded by 30 points or more. There were 32 players whose rating had, from April to May, had been above and then dropped below. And there were 52 players whose ratings in March to May dropped from above the limit to below the limit. Now, does that mean that kid's cheating? No, it does not at all. However, it does flag someone's name and ratings history for further investigation. So that's what it did. We took those names, turned them over to the 3-person group in accordance with the Scholastic Council regulation. The Scholastic regulations, which say it's the director of events, it's the chief tournament director for the tournament, and it's a Scholastic representative to that tournament. And they then look at the detailed ratings history for that handful of players, literally. Because many of these you can just dismiss, right? Outright. Okay, the kid's rating went over by 5 points in 1 month and then dropped below. So just throw that one off to the side. That's not an issue. But when you have a player, okay, from November of last year through March was as much as 200 points over the limit, and then now it's down under, that doesn't necessarily mean the kid was cheating. Doesn't mean that at all. It could just mean it just is an indicator that kid's playing strength is probably higher than what that rating supplement rating was in May. And that's the kind of things that this 3-person committee would look at, and then make some assessments for this particular tournament and for the high school tournament, in that regard. And there were some players who got resectioned because of that. And then one of the other things the algorithm does is it looks for multiple players on the same team where you see that drop. Mm-hmm. And there were some teams that we saw that. And so, but when you look at them, in fact, the 2 teams that immediately come to my mind, both of them, the kids had gone over the limit by like 5 or 10 points. So it really wasn't, kind of an eye raiser about, well, yeah, they had playing in an under 900 section. They had one kid rated, 1,100, another rated 1,200, another rated 950, and they all got it underneath just in time. It wasn't like that at all for anything we saw at this tournament or the one at the high school. So like I said, we're a learning organization, and we learn from the events that transpired, and we're not looking for, quote, sandbagging. We're looking for ratings irregularities that suggest we need to look closer at what's going on here and whether or not there is anything that's not proper. Mm-hmm. Do we wish we had something like that for the junior high? Yeah, maybe so. But like I said, we're learning. Yeah. And we're going to continue to learn from these types of things about how to handle them, and so that we can have the discussions before the tournament about making decisions that may need to be made, as opposed to, oh, gee, it's in the 5th round and now somebody comes forward. Because I've been running these national events and been involved with them for probably about a dozen years now. And it's usually in the 4th or 5th round is when somebody steps forward and says, Sally Smith's or Johnny Jones's rating in some system, in East Bulgaria is 3,400. So why is he even playing in the K1 under 500 and unrated section? Mm-hmm. And then we go through this big rigmarole and try to find out what's going on. But I think we've got, in the past 5 years, we've really started looking at other rating systems' ratings. And we have data from the Northwest rating system, from the Chess Express rating system, from the Kansas rating system, and from FIDE. And that data is all screened when a player enters the tournament, in particular when a player enters as an unrated. And then I can say, no, he's not unrated. He's not played in the U.S. chess tournament, but he's got 147 games in the Northwest system. And his rating in the Northwest system is 1483. That's not unrated. Or they've got 57 games in the Chess Express system out of some games they played in Oklahoma or Mississippi or New York or somewhere else. And that kid is not unrated. So initially it was really a tool to separate out the unrateds from people who really have a legitimate rating. But, and that's why nowadays, the unrated sections used to be huge. Now they're very small, sometimes fewer than 70 players, because we're able to screen out a lot of those supposedly unrated players and force them to play into an undersection that is more of an indicator of their strength, because the scholastic regulations are all about fair play. Mm-hmm. And that's how we got to work it to ensure fair play. So the new algorithm that we're working, this prototype, is evolving. I mean, it's evolved in the from between the high schools and this tournament evolved. It changed. So that's, that process is ongoing. We're going to continue to try to improve it and see what we learn out of this tournament to do that.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the long answer, but
No, yeah, and it's good. And again, this was a subject that was debated in some Facebook forums and stuff like that. And having been on the Pittsburgh chess board, I got a and I don't have a lot of board experience personally, but I got a firsthand glimpse of how important it is to follow protocol. So
I think the other important thing to recognize here is we're talking about minors,
right?
And because we're talking about children that are under the age of whatever that happens to be defined for a minor in those particular states or in that part of the country, I think we have to be really, really careful about what people are saying, because that can have significant primary and secondary consequences on that child's life. In cases where that child may have had nothing to do with what happened, or if in fact did, but to publicly accuse or even present the perception that a youth player, that kid is never going to want to play chess again. And I have seen it many times where a player is accused of cheating, was doing nothing, but I'm not playing chess anymore because, people think I'm a cheater, or people think I do this, or people think I do that. And we want to do just the opposite. We want to turn people on to chess,
right?
Not make them go running into the woods and hope I never see a chess set again.
Okay. Carol, do you have anything to add to?
So I think in response to the subtext of the question that we're not doing anything or not happy with how we handled it, U.S. Chess has procedures to hear these kinds of complaints. At Atlanta itself, the tournament director made a ruling based on the available information that was presented during that tournament. I'm sure with the gift of time, new information may have come to light since then. So we're not even able to compare apples to apples when we're talking about what we might know now and what we knew then. And so I know there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking that goes on. We're not only committed to ensuring that players have fair play opportunities, but as an organization, due process and following our own procedures for hearing complaints when they hit our office, that is paramount to making sure that everybody gets a fair hearing. And as of yesterday, no complaint has been received by the U.S. Chess Office. So our hands are tied.
Yeah. which is surprising given how much talk there's been that
and our hands are tied to investigate a specific incident without. As our due process says, without the complaint being filed in accordance with our procedures that we have, but it doesn't mean we're not doing anything.
Right.
Like I mentioned this algorithm in detail.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've said enough about it for the time being, and if there's a complaint, then down the line there can be further discussion about it. So I just have one more major topic, and then if anyone has a question, we can do that, and then we'll let you guys shuffle off to your next meeting, which I'm sure you have no shortage of. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, and when we had Dan Lucas on, the director of publications for U.S. Chess, I also talked with him a little bit about the overall health of U.S. chess, but you guys obviously also are extremely qualified to talk about this. It's an organization that is known to have had ups and downs over the years. It seems like chess is doing great, but I still wanted to hear both of your perspective on how it's doing generally at this moment?
Yeah, I think we're in a very, very good position. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the executive director. Financially, our board, in particular, Alan Priest and Chuck Unruh, our treasurer, have, committed to overseeing our finances both at the operational level. Chuck also chairs the LMA Trust, and so, we've got very capable, good people. There were others before that who helped the organization reframe how it spent money, how it looked at its budgets, and all. So I'm the beneficiary of that. And financially, I think we're in a very, very solid footing right now. In terms of, the state of the organization, Mike talking about a learning organization, I think that's really true. And what I translate that into is that we have a lot of opportunities, and whether that's programs that we may want to launch, or ways to improve our internal practices and processes for doing things, to upgrading our aging infrastructure. All of those things are going to put us in a position that we will become a sustainable organization into the future. And, they require investments of time and money, but we're in a good position to be able to do that so that we can grow the organization in the way that the board wants us to grow. So.
Excellent. And so hiring someone whose specific job will be to focus on fundraising, I gather that's sort of a symbol of the health of the organization that you guys are able to do that.
Absolutely. And I don't know the timing and all. We have another position. It'll be a more program focused position that will likely come late in 2018, if not early 2019. Things are just constantly being reworked to meet our current needs rather than just filling a position that's vacant from a past life. So we continually evaluate what our needs are to get us where we want to go.
Okay. And one last one is our guests always like to hear book recommendations. Often, of course, we have grandmasters and super strong players who talk about what books have been most influential in their chess development, but we don't necessarily need to stick to that topic. So do either of you, whether it's helped with Mike with your chess or just general interest, have any recommendations that come to mind?
Well, I'm just rated 1100, so whoever's been writing the books I've been reading ought to be shot. But honestly, I think the one book that influenced me the most was Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess, which I saw, when I was young, and I still have the original book and gave it, to my kids, and it's ripped in pieces and everywhere. But for me, that was sort of the book of the time for me as a young kid growing up.
Yeah,
but now my wife complains about my 2 walls full of about 2,000 books. You've never read any of those.
Right, yeah.
Oh, yes, I have. So.
Yeah, much easier to buy them than to read them. Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess was also my first chess book, and my chess coach growing up was Steve Shutt, someone who's been very active in USCF and scholastic chess.
Yeah, he was a very important member of the Scholastic Council for many years.
Yeah, so he's a great teacher and a great role model. So, I joined the chess club at my school when I was in 6th grade and excitedly got a book. So I bring him this book, Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess, and I say, "Oh, I got this book. Have you seen this? Have you heard of this guy?" So naturally, Shad is he's a bit of a troll, as we call it nowadays, but he's pretty sarcastic. So he looks at it, he looks familiar. I think I might know who that is. So now I'm this 12-year-old kid who thinks Bobby Fischer's like an obscure chess player because he didn't just say, "Oh yeah, that's the most famous chess player of all time," and I didn't know any better. So it took me a while to figure out Chet's sense of humor. So what about you, Carol? Whether it's organizational dynamics or learning about crazy chess players or what?
Now, I think.
I knew how the horsey moved before I took the job. But so, given my background, I do read a number of management books. And there's a book by a Stanford business professor. I think his name is Bob Sutton. And the name of the book is The No A-Hole Rule. And it's really about organizations shouldn't tolerate bad behavior from anyone, regardless of how good of a contributor they are, because they create toxicity in the environment where you're working. And that book has really resonated with me throughout my career. And I think, many organizations have toxic components to it. And I think we're not immune to that.
Yeah, and I think USCF may have violated that rule at some point in the past.
And so that would be my recommendation for anybody who wants a good management book to read.
Okay, excellent. Okay, any questions from anyone else? Or okay, well, I think that we are done here. I really appreciate your time, and I'm excited to see what happens with USCF in the coming years.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, and we've got 2,300 young players in there slugging it out, and they've got 4 rounds left to go. And I've always felt that the involvement of the parents is inversely proportional to the age of the kids. Mm-hmm. So I think the parents will get much more involved in what's going on here in the next 3 rounds, and they'll be. My kid lost because that kid's shoe was untied. I mean, there'll be all these off the wall complaints we'll start getting, but that's just part of the tournament life. It's just the way it is.
I love nationals. I mean, to me, it's just seeing all these kids come together to use their brains. I mean, it's an amazing thing. So the competitive element it has a place, but we want to keep it at a high plane, but not too high of a plane. So yeah, it should be fun, and everyone's doing a great job running the tournament so far. So hopefully no drama or no unexpected drama in the last few rounds.
Thanks for having us on.
Okay, thank you. The new Perpetual Chess theme music is courtesy of Geert Vanderveld. Special shout out to him. I also want to thank everyone who supports the podcast. That includes people who tell their friends about it, people who write positive reviews on Apple Podcasts, and most of all, those who have donated to support the show. I spend about 5 hours a week on each episode, and even though I love doing it, it can be hard to find the time. Without the support of my Patreon and PayPal Perpetual Chess partners, the show would not be possible. They are Adam Ralph, Adam Vrancoulge, Adrian Gutierrez, Andres Krizdewa, I hope I did okay there, Andres, on your name, Alex Pejas, Chris Wainscott, Chad Hilton, Chris Lott, Christopher Wood, Coach Jay's Chess Academy, Chris Flanagan, Daniel Naylor, Daniel Schaefer, Gary Andrews, Greg Shahadi, James Bonastia, Jason Dunbar, Jennifer Valens, Jeffrey Martello, John Fernandez, Jen Shahadi, Jen Scream, Jerry Wells, John Thompson, Johnny McMenamin, Kelly Palmer, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Lorraine Dore, Matthew Passy, Macaulay Peterson, Matthew Tedesco, Pascal Charbonneau, Paul Sweeney, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Randy Tempo, Ricky Grahalva, Rob Lazorchek, Robert Steiner, Tatyev Abrahamian, Thomas Stanix, Thomas Tachenko, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Todd Bryant, Tony Rotello, Victor Vrancoul, Zhao Cheng, and Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll be back next week with another great